Hello, freaks, geeks, degenerates, and basement dwellers. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Skruffytalez. And this video will, cause an uproar with the Vatniks. Oh my God, they are gonna just explode in the comment section. It's gonna be glorious. It's gonna be so much fun. I can't wait to read it. Anyway, so we're gonna take a look at. Some important stuff first, namely Apotea and how you can help out donating to their cause of providing Ukraine with trauma bags, trauma kits, super crucial. So that's where we're going to start off. After that, we're going to head on over to the, the clickbait of how Russia's lost, or how Russia's did lose 50% of its production capacity, and how this is an indication how Ukraine might actually win. It's clickbait. We're going to go through it, so stick with me. And then after that, we're going to head on over to the maps and check out what's happening. Russia is, advancing along the front line. It has to be said. And then we're going to be focusing towards the end on Pokrovsk, as we usually do here. So, let's get on with it. Apotea, then 50% of Russia's production capacity, and towards the end there, maps. Let's do it. Right, so first things first, let's start off with the really important stuff. These trauma kits, trauma bags from Apotea, a huge Swedish pharmacy, and they have decided to help out and help Ukraine with providing these trauma kits. As you can see, these are large bags. This is no bullshit. And these bags are from a very credible company in Sweden called Snigel. They make tons of military equipment that Swedish soldiers utilize on a daily basis. The bags themselves, they are sturdy, tough, and they will function in a battlefield without a doubt. And then the content itself, it is top grade equipment, tools, and stuff that a combat medic would need on the front line to keep soldiers alive. This is no bullshit. These bags will help Ukrainian combat medics treat wounded the moment an injury occurs in the trenches, in a foxhole, in a basement, or whatever, in a cityscape. This will keep Ukrainian soldiers alive. Combat medics will be able to treat wounded instantly in the trenches. It will allow them to set up triage centers in bunkers and in basements while artillery's hitting their position and everything. These are not fancy gadgets like drones, not cool vehicles where you got a insignia on the door because some YouTuber did something. This saves actual lives. This is incredibly important. Apotea has provided Ukraine with roughly 1,000 of these bags so far, and this actually has an impact. Drones has made it virtually impossible to conduct stable, safe medevacs. Drones will hit anything that moves, which means a wounded soldier might have to spend 3 or 4, maybe days, maybe a full week in the trenches, wounded, without being able to be evacuated to a field hospital. And in order to keep those soldiers alive, the combat medics needs bags like this. I cannot state I cannot overstate, or how important these bags are. So if you are from Sweden, please click the link down below to Apotea, and you can donate 100 crowns, 300 crowns, or whatever. If you're from outside Sweden and want to chip in on this, you can visit my Patreon, link down below. I will happily take your donations and then ship it on to Apotea. I have so far provided roughly $200 to Apotea for the international audience. I'm more than happy to keep this up to make sure we all can help Apotea funding these trauma kits that are super crucial for the Ukrainians. I cannot stress it enough how important equipment like this is. This will keep soldiers alive while they're waiting for the gap in the drone screen and the drone coverage so that a car can move in and pick them up and get them out of Dodge safely. So please, if you're from, I'm gonna do this in Sweden. Är du från Sverige, för fan, klicka på länken, gå till Apotea och donera en 100. Det kommer rädda liv. Jag garanterar dig att det kommer rädda liv. So that's enough of the Swedish. Like I said, my Patreon is available if you're from outside of Sweden and want to chip in and help out providing Ukrainian soldiers with equipment that actually will save Ukrainian lives. Right, moving on. Right, we're now going to get the clickbait out of the way. So what is all of this about? Well, it's about Ukraine's chances of actually winning the war. So we're going to go back in time. The Vatniks are going to go apeshit loco because they don't like this at all, but we're going to do it anyway. So 1941, Germany invades the USSR, and in 6 months, Germany secures 1.7 million square kilometers of the USSR. And that also means that Germany in 6 months secures or occupies 45% of the USSR's population in 6 months. And on top of that, they also take control of 50% of the USSR's industrial capacity. A massive blow to the Soviet Union in just 6 months. It is an incredible military achievement. Germany is just ramming it straight up Russia's ass. No lubrication, not even spit on the tip. They just rammed it in there, and the Russians had nothing. They couldn't do anything. They just had to bend over and take it. Now, let's compare that to the modern era now. Yes, it's 80 years between, or 90, 80 years, whatever it is. I get that. But now when Ukraine has drones, that affects things. So let's take a look how Ukraine is doing compared to the Russians back in the day. Between 2023 and 2025, Russia has secured roughly 9,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. And that is around 1.5% of Ukraine in total in 24 months. 9,000 square kilometers in 24 months compared to 1.7 million square kilometers in 6 months. A slight difference, right? If you're wondering if the Ukrainians are doing all right in this war. Also, crucially, what was it that saved the USSR? What was it that saved the Soviet Union? It was outside help, mainly from the United States. And we can see it. Every major Soviet generals, Soviet officer, they all said the same thing during the war and even after the war. Take a look. Zhukov here famously said the Red Army could not have continued to fight without Lend-Lease. This is the American assistance. We did not have enough supplies. And in an interview for the 1960s Soviet documentary The Unknown War, take a look what he says here. It must be acknowledged that the Americans supplied us with material without which we could not have formed our reserves or continued the war. Right? Outside help, outside assistance was absolutely essential for the Soviets to fight back and push back the German invasion. And just to hammer in the point here, Khrushchev spoke even more directly, as it says, if the United States had not helped us, we would not have won the war. And in his memoirs, he explained that while Soviet production was enormous, there was this one thing that the most important things were the trucks and food provided by the United States. The United States provided the Soviets with something like 4.5 million tons of food, along with 400,000 trucks and trains on top of it and everything, a bunch of other stuff. And here you can see the People's Commissar of Foreign Trade, who was responsible for receiving the Lend-Lease shipments. He said, Lend-Lease was essential to our victory. Without the American food we received, we could not have fed our army. And this view is consistent across virtually all top Soviet officers, though it did contradict official Soviet propaganda until the 1990s. And there are even a bunch of incredible quotes from Stalin himself, saying the same thing. So quite clearly, the Russians were in a lot of trouble, and they relied on foreign aid that allowed them to keep fighting. So why is this important? Well, this is important because the Soviets were in a much, much worse situation than Ukraine is today. They lost 45% of its population and 50% of its industrial capacity in 6 months and 1.7 million square kilometers in just 6 months. And it was foreign aid that allowed them to fight on. Trains and locomotives from the United States allowed the USSR to ship equipment from their own factories in the eastern parts of the Soviet Union to the front line. That was done with trains and locomotives provided by the United States. 400,000 trucks allowed the Russian army to remain mobile on the battlefield. And American food provided to Russian soldiers, along with winter equipment, clothing and stuff, allowed the Russians to feed and clothe their army and allowed the soldiers to fight on. The Russians were in a much, much, much worse state than the Ukrainians are today. And Ukraine, just like the Soviets of the past, they're getting assistance from the West. They haven't lost 45% of its population. They haven't lost 50% of its industrial capacity. What they have lost is 1.5% of Ukrainian territory in 24 months. So if the West just keeps providing Ukraine with assistance, there is a real, very much so, real possibility that Ukraine can turn this around and win this. Now remember, the Soviets lost 26 million soldiers fighting the Germans. Staggering numbers. And it's kind of the same thing here. They're just throwing people at the problem, hoping that enough bodies will actually bury the Ukrainian soldiers so that they can advance. Russia never relies on fancy tactics. Never. Every war they fight, they have staggering losses. And if you just provide the Ukrainians with enough Western equipment, they can hold and turn this around. Right? History has proven that it is possible with Western assistance that a army can actually defeat a much larger and terrible opponent. So the West just needs to keep providing Ukraine with equipment, and they can actually stand a chance of turning this around. Guaranteed. All right, that's enough of that. Let's move on to maps. But before maps, we're going to take a look at these two here. Here we have from 425th Scala Battalion, and they report this is a key point. The railway track divides Pokrovsk in two parts. According to the report of the 7th Corps, it can be understood that the enemy mostly controls the southern part of the city beyond the railway. The northern part is mostly gray zone, but with more activity from our forces who even managed to conduct raids in the southern part. Hey, take a look at that. That's what I've been telling you for a month now, isn't it? So tactically, the situation has somewhat improved. Interesting. But take a look at this. This was noted by the Westerners from Ukraine control map, who marked only the southern part as under enemy control. A few days ago, almost the entire city was marked in purple. Okay, so Ukraine control map, excellent source. I use it when I make my own map. I check for 5 or 6 different mappers, and Ukraine control map is one of those maps that I check when I map out my own map. But come on, Ukraine control map, I've been saying this for what, 1-2 months, and 3-4 months ago I predicted that this situation was going to happen. Come on guys, my map is spot on. Anyway, moving on, here we have Ukrainian forces have cleared 11.5 square kilometers of Russian positions near Pokrovsk, forcing Russians to deploy operational reserves in the Pokrovsk and Mirnorod areas due to heavy losses, according to Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi. Very encouraging. So the Ukrainians, they keep repeating the same thing. They are in control, more or less in control of the northern half of Pokrovsk, and they are inflicting massive amounts of casualties on the Russians as they're trying to push in. Okay, now maps. So with the maps, we're gonna start off with Mayakovsk. No, it's not. It's Andrew Perpetua. My bad. So we're zooming in on we're zooming in Vovchansk to begin with. Zooming in here to take a look. Here we can see how the Russians are pushing down through the woods. We've talked about this in my last video, or was it? Well, it's like almost 2 weeks ago. So yeah, you can see here they're advancing down through the forest here like we predicted that they would. They're also trying to come through here. We can see that on Mayakovsk 73's map. Here you can see how they're trying to push in through here. We got some Ukrainians now moving in to counter them. But even on Mayakovsk 73, we can see how the Russians are pushing down through the forest and entering these smaller villages. Simply because this is an easier area to advance through than through urban areas. So if they have numerical superiority in the woods, they will be able to make advances through here and continue further south, like we said in the last video. Moving on, Kupiansk, here you can see Russia is shelling Kindrashivka and the roads and the forests south of it. So quite clearly we have Ukrainians operating here. Moving over to Mayakovsk 73, of course, he still claims that the Ukrainians have this push here almost all the way to Hulubivka. And of course the Russians are shelling over here. Evidently Russia is struggling here, and they're applying a lot of resources to hold the flank, which might indicate that Ukraine is trying to push in here towards Hulubivka, even if this push here might have been dealt with by the Russians. At any rate, Kupiansk is not under Russian control. It is still very much contested, and the Ukrainians are putting up a fight here, and the Russians are, according to Ukrainian sources, struggling a bit to push in, and it's mainly saturation and infiltration units operating in the city. A bit south, you can see how Russia is pushing in here towards the Oskil River with a second prong coming here. If they manage to reach the river, of course, then this area here will be isolated, and the Russians will be able to grab this piece of terrain here. Russia keeps pushing towards Lyman in the south, coming down through the forest here as well. Just like at Vovchansk, the woods here, if the Russians do have numerical superiority, this is where they want to fight, even if there's more than likely plenty of foxholes and bunkers and trenches here. This is more favorable terrain compared to being out in the farmland, obviously. And we can also see how the Russians are pushing down along the river here to secure the various bridges. They need to get down. Here we have these two bridges. It's destroyed, this one, but they really need to come down here to effectively isolate Lyman from the north. And the bridges across the Oskil here are all blown up. If we zoom in, one destroyed bridge, another one. This is a dam, so this is probably going to get blown up in the end. Just like all the bridges, we have more bridges zooming in. destroyed, as you can see. So Ukraine can obviously build pontoon bridges and what have you, but as you can see, Russia is trying to isolate Lyman by blowing up all the bridges and coming in from the north and securing the roads leading in towards Lyman from the north. Siversk is under a lot of pressure at the moment. You can see how the Russians are trying to come up from the south. They pushed out to the outskirts, but it seems as if these defensive lines are pretty much holding. There might be some Russians sneaking through, but the main defenses appear to be holding for now, at least. We'll see what the Russians can do about that situation. Konstantinivka, interesting. We're going to jump over to Andrew here. For moving down, we can see here blue, a lot of blue. We're going to go back a couple of days here. It's the furthest extent of the Russian incursion towards Konstantinivka, north of Turetsk. But take a look. This is on the 23rd, and we're moving over to the 24th. And ever since, you can see here how the Russians have been pushed back and pushed out of Konstantinivka. Ukraine has reclaimed a couple of villages. Very encouraging. We're going to return to Pokrovsk in a moment. We're going to move down here. A lot of shelling here by the Russians. Maybe they will try another push towards Malatokmachka eventually, based on all of the artillery strikes in the area. And of course, the push towards Huliapol is what everyone's talking about. And like I've been saying for I don't know how many months, we're gonna jump over to this map here. This river is where Ukraine probably has based their defenses at the moment, with Huliapol and some other villages here as anchors along the front line. Russia will reach the river. It is inevitable. It's slow going because the Ukrainians are putting up good defense, but they will reach the river, and reaching this river is when we'll see what happens. If they can get across, then it's a problem. If Ukraine has proper defenses set up, then Russia might actually struggle getting across. I don't think we have all that many bridges along this river, as you can see, meaning it will be an issue for the Russians crossing here, would be my guess. I've even seen Vatniks being skeptical that this city or town, Huliapol, will fall. Everyone seems to agree that this is a huge fortress. We'll see how that plays out. But I think Russia will more than likely push up to the river, and when they are at the river, we will see a shift, and they will start trying to push from the south in an attempt to isolate Huliapol, would be my guess. So they want this supply line here, and then they will start moving up north to cut this supply line. Let's see, and you have some smaller roads here that Ukraine can obviously utilize, but if the Russians do push up the river, then the drones will start hunting this area, obviously. So yes, this is gonna keep on going. The interesting part will be when Russia reaches the river, can they get across? So yeah, that's that. Now we're gonna move over to Pokrovsk, and here you have a Ukrainian supply line. You can see the amount of destroyed vehicles along it. So this is the supply line leading in towards Pokrovsk from the north, or one of them leading in from the north. And if we move back a day or two, this is what's important here. Here you have Ukrainian infantry in town, again in Ukrainian infantry located in Pokrovsk, and here south of the railroad. And when we move over to Mayakovsk 73 and zoom in, you see the same thing. Lots of Ukrainians geolocated within Pokrovsk, and here you have south of the railroad. Take a look at it. This is a armored vehicle, Russian, destroyed on the 26th, so a day or two ago. But as you can see, north of the railroad, lots of Ukrainians, the northern half is more or less under Ukrainian control, and you have some Ukrainian presence south of the railroad. So we're gonna jump on over to my map to take a look at how I interpret what the mappers are telling us and what the Ukrainian General Staff is telling us. We're going to take a look at one thing though before we take a look at Pokrovsk. We're going to move up here to Shakove because things are happening up here. Russia has apparently secured this bridge. We have a number of drone strikes by the Ukrainians hitting Russians hiding underneath the bridge. This bridge is blown up. This is why one of those mechanized assaults failed a month or two ago when Russians pushed up this way. The bridge was destroyed. They got stuck and all the drones just wiped everything out. But this bridge was still intact. And Ukraine has been striking Russians hiding underneath it, and they have been hitting targets in the southern parts of Shakove. So Russia has made it into Shakove. Unclear if they are still holding positions or not. This is a bit concerning though. Some mappers seem to indicate that Russia is pushing up this way in order to reach Shakove, but I'm thinking since they're holding the bridge, they might have been able to, get across with all the fog and what have you. It is a worry though. This is troubling because there are 4 bridges in and around Shakove. You have these 2 here, you have another one here, and you have the 4th here. And then there's one more in Sofika and another one here. That's another one here between Pankivka and stuff like that. But these 6 bridges, or the 4 at Shakove, is what Russia really wants. Because then they can push troops across the river, build up forces in Shakove, and from here, of course, they can push towards Dobropili over here. And if they manage to move out of Shakove towards the area here, they cut a lot of logistics leading down to Pokrovsk and Myrnorad. So this is important. Hopefully Ukraine can deal with this situation, but it's troubling that Russians are hiding under the bridge and Ukraine is striking targets in the southern parts of Shakove. We need to keep an eye on this. Right, moving down to Pokrovsk. Not much has happened. Some slight changes to the map. Important is that Ukraine appears to have been able to take this tree line and pushing the Russians away from the vital supply lines leading into Myrnorad, widening the gap here. The drones are still an issue, obviously, but they have pushed the Russians a bit away from the supply lines coming into Myrnorad. You have sporadic Russian infiltration units spread out here in the farmland, but they are being taken care of with drones and artillery and what have you. But there are Russians sneaking around in smaller units, not being in control at all, but infiltration units operating within enemy territory, behind enemy lines, doing standard Jaeger style operations, hiding, spotting targets, and calling in airstrikes and drone strikes and artillery. Moving down to the town of Pokrovsk itself here. So this is my interpretation of events. North of the railroad, we said this ages ago, the railroad will be the main line of defense. It's going to be the natural divide between the Russians and the Ukrainians. The Russians will push up the railroad and then they will begin to struggle. And we're now seeing other sources reporting the same. So north of the railroad, Ukraine has control. There are Russians present. They're sneaking around and Ukraine is trying to hunt them down. Which is why I've outlined it with dotted lines and what have you and not solid blues. This is fairly contested territory. Russia is making pushes in the west. They've been trying to push up into this area here, but they're facing resistance. It's a bit unknown who's in control at the moment. We had a lot of Russians geolocated the first half of November. Second half, not so much, but there are some Russians running around up here. But interesting to note, though, that the Ukrainians themselves, they are saying that they have more or less control north of the railroad, and they're also denying Russia a chance to establish a presence in the high rises here. This is where Ukraine waved around the flag, and they're saying that Russia is struggling pushing into the high-rise buildings here. And this is, of course, also where we, a day or two ago, saw Ukrainian special forces conducting clearing operations, and that was here in the blue box here. So this is where special forces for Ukraine were conducting clearing out buildings street by street and what have you. So clearly Ukraine is operating here, and they've been reporting on this for a couple of days or for weeks even. So Ukraine can move troops south of the railroad, and they can move in and fortify positions in the high-rise buildings. Sorry. And they also have elite operators securing streets here just north of the high-rises. And we've seen multiple Ukrainians geolocated in this part of town here as well. This is where a week or two ago we saw Ukrainians pushing across the railway. What happened to them once they reached the southern end, who knows, but since they left cover up here, should indicate that they feel safe enough to leave cover. So north of the railway up here should be under Ukrainian control, right? And we've also seen quite recently Ukrainians operating here, maneuvering. So I'm thinking they might have pushed up along the railroad here through the cover of the woods to infiltrate this part of town here. But yeah, essentially north of the railroad, Ukraine has control. Russia is in control of this part of town here, more or less. And I think this is a gray area here. We're seeing it on some of the other mappers as well. I've had it as contested for ages, and now we're seeing some other mappers updating their maps and apparently agreeing with me that this is a contested area. I mean, down here we probably have more Russians here than up here, but you know, it is a bit of unknown and a bit of a shit show over here would be my guess. So yeah, that's that. Russia is still trying to push into the neck here at Myrnorad. They're struggling with Myrnorad. They can't really get a proper foothold, especially in the north. They did manage to push in here, but since then it's been tough going. They are trying to push into the neck here, but it seems as if Ukraine is actually managing to hold the line and push the Russians out whenever they try to move in. So that is basically the situation at the moment, I think, for Pokrovsk. And I mean, this is, and people just keep, you know, some YouTubers continue questioning what the hell's going on. And I'm not gonna, tell the Ukrainians you should pull out or whatever. What I can do is speculate a bit what the hell is going on. And I think this is war economics. For every killed Ukrainian in Pokrovsk and Myrnorad, they get more bang for the buck compared to if the Ukrainians, if they lose troops out here in the fields, right? So for every Ukrainian killed up here, they might inflict 2, 3, or 4 casualties on the Russians. Down here in Pokrovsk and in Myrnorad, it's looking like, me speculating here, maybe double that, right? So if you can inflict, say, 5, 6, maybe 7 casualties on the Russian side for every Ukrainian that dies, it makes more sense mathematically to fight down here than up here, right? It's a better deal for the Ukrainian army. War economics, right? you get more out of each Ukrainian killed down here than behind the cities. And the Russians are, just throwing everything they have at this at the moment. They're moving troops in from all over the place, from 4 or 5 other sections of the front line. They're just draining those areas of troops and pushing it all into Pokrovsk and Myrnorad. So the Ukrainians realize that, they have the advantage here. If they can, urban environments always favor the defender. And if the Russians are hell-bent on fighting here, where everything favors Ukraine, why not oblige them? Why not fight here then? Why not hold? Since they're just going to push everything they have into this massive kill zone where everything favors Ukraine. Why should Ukraine fall back and fight on a battlefield that favors Russia when they can fight here where everything favors Ukraine? So that is why I think Ukraine just keeps pushing in troops in order to hold the line, to get the most bang for the buck within these 2 cities. That is more than likely the reason why Ukraine is doing what they're doing. And for the Russians, why they just keep pushing like this, it's like they did. You can see here how they tried to push in. This was during the Bunny Ears operation. They tried to come in north, the Russians. They almost established a presence, but the Ukrainians shut them down pretty quickly in just 2 or 3 days. No one talked about this because everyone was focused on the Bunny Ears, but this happened at the same time, and the Ukrainians were really fast on it and just shut everything down. But as you can see, the Russians did make an attempt to push straight in north of Pokrovsk to cut all the supplies in order to link up here to the west eventually and completely surround Pokrovsk and Myrnorad. This failed, and now Ukraine can just put troops and resources into holding the cities. But the thing is, why isn't Russia trying this again? Is why the wild thing. If you're pushing into the cities, it only favors Ukraine. Russia really should try and fight out here on the flanks, because that is where they have the advantage. But it seems as if the Ukrainians have fortified the flanks at this point so heavily that the Russians have no other choice than to push in. Or, truth be told, my personal opinion is that it's political pressure. The Russian generals, they want to try this again. But political pressure from Moscow is telling them to take these 2 goddamn cities now. So they have no other choice but just to throw everything into the meat grinder. And the Ukrainians, they appear to be very happy to oblige and have a fight here where everything favors the defender. Right, so that's that. The Vatniks have been saying for 2 months, I think, that Pokrovsk would fall at the end of November. So we're damn close to that deadline. We'll see if they pull it off. They have a day or 2 to manage that. But the Ukrainians, they're holding half the town, definitely, without a doubt. But anyway, most important of all, consider supporting Apotea and those trauma kits. It is super important stuff that Apotea is doing, and we can all help out with it. So check out the links down below. But yeah, that's gonna have to be it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found it interesting, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. As always, Kupa Marsh, Ukraine, and give them hell. Ash in the air cuts my lungs like a blade. Mud on my
my boots, but I march unafraid. Fire on the hills paints the sky with rage. I'm a shield for the weak, for freedom, this war I wage. Yeah. Surrender, never fall, never crawl through the blood and the smoke. I will answer the call against 1,000 orcs with their axes and greed. I'll stand defiant, I'll bleed. All free nations I will lead. Through the ash and mud, the fire I go. Their war drums thunder, but my heart beats louder. Steel in my hands provides me with power. A sword for the bold, for the ones who won't kneel. The orcs will break their teeth on the edge of my staff. Never fall, never crawl through the blood and the smoke. I will answer the call against 1,000 orcs with their axes and greed. I'll stand defiant, I'll bleed. Oh, free nations I will lead. Through the ash and mud, the fire I go. My knees won't bow to the tyrant's will. Let them try to chain me or break their irons. I will always be free. Through the ash, through the mud, through the fire I climb. For my children to live free until the